Kimberly slowly mopped the floor of the River Mall, making sure not to miss a single spot. At 56 years old, every movement caused her back to ache, but she couldn't afford to be sloppy. The last warning from the manager still echoed in her ears. "Mrs. Anderson," Mr. Thompson's sharp voice said behind her, "you missed the spot by the east entrance again." Kimberly straightened up, feeling her muscles ache. "I apologize, Mr. Thompson. I'll fix it right away." "That's the third time this week." He paused, looking through the papers in his file. "You do realize that we have a line of candidates for your position, younger, more energetic." Kimberly felt her heart skip a beat. "Please, Mr. Thompson, I've been here for 7 years. You know I've always—" "That's why I'm giving you one more chance," he interrupted. "But this is your last warning. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." After the manager left, Kimberly wiped her sweaty forehead with a shaking hand. She just couldn't lose this job. Not now, when the rent had gone up again, and the prices in the stores seemed insane. Her eyes fell on her watch. It was almost 11 in the evening. In her pocket were 3 $5 bills, carefully folded and wrapped in a napkin. All that was left until next Friday. "Kimberly, dear, can I help you?" asked Rose, the cleaning lady from the second floor, her kind face expressing genuine concern. "No, thank you, Rose. I'm almost done." "You look pale today. Did you skip lunch again?" Kimberly tried to smile. "I just didn't have time. Too much work to do." Rose shook her head. "You have to take care of yourself. Do you want me to share my sandwich?" No, I'm good. I'll eat at home." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Kimberly couldn't accept help. Not from Rose, who was raising 3 grandchildren on her own after her daughter died in a car accident. The last train was leaving in 20 minutes. Kimberly hurriedly packed her belongings into a worn bag. $15 was all she had left. She mentally calculated what she could buy: a packet of rice for $3, canned beans for $4, bread for $2. "Good night, Kimberly," Bill, the guard, called out. "Take care of yourself." "Thanks, Bill. You too." As she left the mall, she shivered in the cold wind. Her old jacket had long since lost its ability to keep her warm, but a new one would cost her a fortune. As she descended into the subway, Kimberly heard music. It was quiet at first, but it grew louder with each step. A guitar. Someone was playing something familiar, a tune that reminded her of the past. Turning the corner, she saw a man. He was sitting under a dim lamp bent over his guitar. His clothes were worn but clean, and his fingers moved across the strings with amazing grace. "Good evening," he said, looking up. They were tired but still retained some inner dignity. "Good evening," Kimberly replied, involuntarily slowing her pace. In front of the musician was an open guitar case. At the bottom were a few coins and a crumpled dollar. "It's a beautiful melody," she said, stopping. "Is it Bach?" The man smiled, but his smile was sad. "My own composition. It's called Lost Dreams." Something in his voice made Kimberly freeze. Perhaps it was the same tiredness she saw in her mirror every morning. "How long have you been playing here?" she asked, although she usually tried not to talk to strangers on the subway. 3 weeks, he shrugged. "Since I lost my job at the orchestra. Budget cuts, you know." Kimberly knew. Oh, how well she knew what it meant to lose everything because of circumstances beyond your control. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "Don't be." He touched the strings again. "Life goes on." Music filled the underpass, bouncing off the walls. It was a sad melody, but there was some hope in it. Kimberly remembered how she and Robert, her late husband, used to go to concerts in the park. He always said that music heals the soul. She still had her $15 in her pocket, money that meant the difference between a full and a hungry week. She knew she had to go. She wouldn't miss the last train. But the music. At home, in her small apartment, Kimberly stood for a long time in front of the almost empty refrigerator. A bottle of water, a bag of expired pasta, and a jar of mustard stood alone on the shelves. Somewhere in the dark subway passage, a lonely musician was playing his sad melody, and on the kitchen table were 3 $5 bills waiting for her decision. Kimberly hadn't slept all night. She turned her pillow over trying to find the cooler side, but sleep did not come. The guitar tune was still playing in her head, and the 3 $5 bills lay on the kitchen table as if to rebuke her indecision. At 5 in the morning she gave up. She turned on the light and sat down at the table looking at the worn bills. "You're crazy, Kimberly," she whispered to herself. "You've lost your mind." The phone rang suddenly, making her flinch. "Hello?" Her voice was hoarse from the sleepless night. "Kimberly?" It was Rose. "Sorry to call you so early. I just wanted to let you know that there's an inspection today from headquarters. Thompson's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, looking for everyone." "Thanks for the heads up. You okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. I didn't sleep well." After the call, Kimberly went to the window. The sky was still dark, but the first rays of the sun were already touching the tops of the skyscrapers. There were 3 hours left before her shift. She took the only clean uniform out of her closet. The fabric was frayed at the elbows, but there was no other. The money on the table seemed to mock her. At 6:30, Kimberly was already walking down the subway steps. Her heart was pounding as she approached the place where she had seen the musician yesterday. He was there. He was sitting with his head bent over his guitar, as if he hadn't moved since last night. In front of him was the same case, just as empty. "Good morning," he said, looking up. They were red with fatigue. Kimberly froze. She had planned to just put the money down and leave, but something in his eyes made her stop. "Have you been here all night?" she asked. He smiled weakly. "Not all night. I went to warm up in a 24-hour coffee shop, but they don't really welcome visitors like that. Where do you live now?" He shrugged. "Wherever I have to. The shelter on 7th Street sometimes has openings, but you have to be there by 6 in the evening, and people are more generous with donations at that time." Kimberly felt her hand clenching the money in her pocket. $15. For her, a week of savings. For him, a chance to sleep in warmth. She trailed off. "I want to—" "Don't," he said gently. "I can see that it's not easy for you." For some reason, these words broke something inside her. Kimberly took out the money and put it in the case. It wasn't much. "Wait," he called out as she turned to leave. "I don't even know your name." "Kimberly." She threw over her shoulder and quickly walked away, feeling tears coming to her eyes. For the next hour and a half she walked to the mall. Her legs were buzzing, her back was aching, and she had one thought in her head. How can I live to see my paycheck? A security guard met her at the service entrance. "Mrs. Anderson, it's good that you're early. Mr. Thompson is looking for you urgently." "I don't know, but he was very insistent that you come up to his office right away." As Kimberly climbed the stairs, she could feel her knees trembling, and not just from fatigue. Had someone complained about her work? Did they notice the missed spots from yesterday? She knocked on the door of the administrator's office. "Come in," Thompson's voice said. Kimberly opened the door and froze in her tracks. Thompson was not the only one sitting at the desk. Next to him was a tall man in an expensive suit whom she had never seen before. "Ah, Mrs. Anderson." Thompson looked unusually excited. "I'd like you to meet Mr. Williams from the head office. He wants to talk to you." Kimberly felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. The thought of the musician and the money she had spent flashed through her mind. Now that she was going to lose her job, those $15 seemed like a crazy waste. "Sit down, Mrs. Anderson," Mr. Williams said, pointing to an empty chair. "We have a very serious conversation to have with you." Kimberly nervously twitched her shoulders as Mr. Williams opened his laptop. There was a tense silence in the office, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. "Mrs. Anderson," Williams finally spoke. "Do you know why you're here?" "No, sir," her voice trembled. "If it's because of the stains at the entrance yesterday—" "Stains?" He raised an eyebrow in surprise. "No, it's not that at all. Look at this." He turned the laptop screen toward her. The subway surveillance video clearly showed her putting the money into the musician's case. "I don't understand," Kimberly whispered. "Isn't that forbidden?" William smiled. "Do you know how many views this video has gotten in the last 6 hours? Over 1 million. People are looking for you." "Me?" Kimberly felt the blood drain from her face. "But why?" "Because you gave the last of your money to a man who seemed like a simple street musician. But do you know who he really is?" Williams clicked the mouse, and an old photograph appeared on the screen. It showed the same man, but younger, in a tuxedo on a large stage with a guitar. "That's Lucas Whitmore," Williams said. 10 years ago, he was one of the most famous guitarists in the country. He performed at Carnegie Hall and toured all over the world. Kimberly felt her breath catch in her throat. "A car accident," Williams answered quietly. "An arm injury, depression, medical bills. He hadn't played in 5 years. He opened the video again, but this time it was different." Lucas stood in front of the camera, his eyes glistening with tears. "This woman," he said in the video, "she didn't even know who I was, but she gave me everything she had. And you know what? For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I could play again, that my hands—" He held up his trembling fingers. "They still remember the music." Kimberly felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just wanted to help. He played like it was all he had left." "It was," Williams nodded. "And what you did changed his life." The video went viral. Thousands of people wrote comments and offered to help. 3 concert halls have already offered him performances. Thompson, who had been sitting silently in the corner all this time, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Anderson, we are very proud to have you working in our mall. Lucas wants to meet you," Williams said. "To thank you in person. He's waiting downstairs." Kimberly shook her head. "But my shift is still on." "Don't worry about it," Thompson said quickly. "We'll organize everything." "And one more thing," Williams added. "People in the comments are asking how they can help you. Someone noticed your old uniform, your tired appearance. They want to repay your kindness." "No," Kimberly said firmly, raising her voice for the first time in a while. "I don't need to be thanked. I just did what I thought was right." Williams looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "You know, it's words like that that have made millions of people care about your story. In a world where everyone is looking for profit, you simply helped a man in need. And by doing so, you restored faith in humanity not only to Lucas, but to thousands of others." When Kimberly went down to the mall lobby, she immediately recognized Lucas. He was standing by the fountain, dressed in clean, simple clothes. He had his guitar with him. "Mrs. Anderson," his voice was shaky. I don't even know where to begin. You can just call me Kimberly." She smiled hesitantly. "And you don't have to explain anything." He pointed to the bench. "Please, have a seat. I have something to tell you." They sat down, and Lucas looked at his hands for a long time before speaking. 6 years ago, I was returning from a concert. It was raining. The road was slippery. A truck pulled into the oncoming lane. He raised his right arm, showing thin scars. 14 operations. Doctors said I would never be able to play professionally. My debts were growing. My wife couldn't take it anymore and left. I gave up." "But you play," Kimberly said quietly, "and you're very good." "Do you know what happened yesterday?" He turned to her. "When you put that money down, for the first time in 6 years, someone believed in me. Not out of pity, not because they knew who I was. They just believed." "I just heard the music," Kimberly whispered. "That's right." He suddenly perked up. "You heard music, not a broken person. And you know what? After you did that, something incredible happened. He took out his phone. Look, the Philharmonic has offered me a performance next month, a charity concert. And this, he continued, the Ritz has given me a room for 2 weeks so I can prepare. Kimberly felt her eyes fill with tears. I'm so happy for you, Mr. Whitmore. Lucas, he gently corrected her. And that's not all. Do you remember Richard Blackwood? Who is he? The owner of Blackwood Studios, the largest recording studio in the city. He saw the video and, at that moment, an elegant man in an impeccable suit approached them. Here's our heroine. He held out his hand. Richard Blackwood. May I see you for a moment? Kimberly shook his hand in confusion. I have to get back to work. Blackwood sat down next to her. Tell me, do you enjoy cleaning the mall? It's an honest job. It sure is. But what about working for us? I need someone I can trust with my studio, someone with a sense of responsibility and, he glanced at Lucas, an understanding of the value of music. You're offering me a job? Kimberly couldn't believe her ears. With twice the salary, Blackwood nodded, and a full benefits package. Kimberly felt the room shake before her eyes. Because people like you, Blackwood said, are rare in this world. You gave the last of your money to a stranger without even knowing who he was. That's the kind of person my company needs. Lucas touched her hand gently. Take the offer, Kimberly. Let me repay you the same way you helped me. The tears she'd been holding back finally flowed down her cheeks. Kimberly looked at her calloused hands, thinking about all those years of hard work, the empty refrigerator, the broken zipper on her jacket. I don't even know what to say, she wiped her eyes. Say yes, Lucas smiled. Sometimes the hardest decision is to accept help from others. Kimberly remembered last night, her $15 and the music that changed everything. Sometimes the smallest act can set off a chain of life-changing events. She never expected her spontaneous decision to come back to haunt her in this way. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'm in. A month later. Kimberly stood in front of the mirror wearing her new uniform with the Blackwood Studios logo, still in disbelief at the changes in her life. Good morning, Kimberly. Maggie, the sound engineer, greeted her. Today is going to be a busy day. We're recording a new album. Anything special? Oh, you don't know yet? Maggie smiled mysteriously. Lucas Whitmore is coming back. Kimberly froze with a rag in her hands. Today? In an hour. And you know what? He personally asked that you be present at the recording. Things were different in the studio than in the mall. Here, she was known by name, invited to lunch, and asked for her opinion. Mr. Blackwood often stopped to talked about music and artists. Kimberly! Lucas's deep voice rang out in the hallway. He looked completely different with a haircut, a new suit and the same guitar, but now restored to a shiny new look. You look great, she said. Thanks to you, he hugged her. Are you coming to the concert tonight? I have a shift. No, interrupted Mr. Blackwood, who was just passing by. You are my guest of honor tonight. The ticket is in the front row. In the evening, Carnegie Hall was filled to capacity. Kimberly sat awkwardly in her best dress, a gift from her studio colleagues. When Lucas took the stage, the audience erupted in applause. He sat down on a chair and set up the microphone. Good evening. Before I start, I want to tell you a story. A month ago, I was sitting in an underpass thinking that my life was over. All doors were closed. All dreams were shattered. He ran his fingers over the strings. And then she appeared. An ordinary woman, tired after work. She gave me all she had, $15. Not because she knew who I was, not because she expected anything in return, just because she heard the music in my soul when I had stopped hearing it myself. The room fell silent. Kimberly, his voice trembled. Are you there? Please come up. She wanted to refuse, to hide, but the light had already illuminated her seat. The people around her began to applaud. Sometimes a small act can change another person's life, Lucas continued. Kimberly changed mine, and now I want to change her life for the better. This song is for you. The first chords filled the room. Kimberly recognized the melody, the same one he had played on the subway. But now it sounded different, full of hope, gratitude, and life. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. She remembered her small apartment, her empty refrigerator, her broken jacket. It all seemed so far away. After the concert, the entire studio team gathered backstage. Maggie hugged Kimberly. "Do you understand now? You don't just clean for us. You're part of our family." "A big creative family," Mr. Blackwood added, raising his glass. "To Kimberly! To Kimberly!" Everyone chimed in. She stood among these people, musicians, technicians, producers, and felt at home. For the first time in her long years of loneliness, she was not just a cleaner. She was a person whose small act of kindness launched a wave of change.